I burst through the bedroom door, aiming the gun at them. The laughter stopped. The mocking looks on their faces vanished, replaced by fear. My wife, Jenna, scrambled, covering herself with the sheet, and my boss, Greg, froze like a deer in headlights, his smug face losing all its color. He stammered, "What are you doing here, weakling? Want to see how a real man takes your wife?" He smirked, but it was half-hearted. He knew he was in dangerous territory. Jenna leaned closer to him, putting on that sarcastic, high-pitched laugh she used when she thought she had the upper hand. "Yes, darling, he wants to see how a real man pleases me." Her eyes flicked to me, full of challenge, daring me to react. I could feel my hand tighten around the cold steel of the gun, my mind barely holding on to reason as I looked at the two people who had stabbed me in the back. I pulled the trigger. Just a few weeks earlier, I never would have guessed I'd be here. I thought my life was solid, unbreakable. Jenna and I had been married for 7 years. Enough time to think I knew every single piece of her, every smile, every sigh. We had what people called a perfect life. A decent home, 2 dogs, a strong marriage. Or so I thought. Looking back, maybe I'd ignored the signs. There were the late nights she'd brushed off with excuses that barely made sense. She'd laugh and say, "Just a girl's night, hon. Why don't you trust me?" And wave it away, each time sounding just a little less convincing. But I didn't want to believe my wife was lying. I wanted to believe the woman I'd married would never betray me. And my boss, Greg? He was like a mentor to me. I trusted him, maybe even looked up to him. It was only when things started spiraling at work that the nagging feeling in my gut grew into something I couldn't ignore. Greg started acting strangely, giving me tasks that led to dead ends or keeping me off big projects. He'd corner me with questions, testing me, making comments about weakness or ambition. I couldn't understand it, until the night I found Jenna's lipstick smeared on a crumpled receipt from a fancy hotel, dated just a day before. That was the first crack. I felt my entire world tilt, like the ground had opened up, and I was standing on the edge of a cliff. My first thought was denial. There had to be some explanation, some reason. Maybe it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. I convinced myself of that lie for exactly 3 days, until I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. Late nights, whispered phone calls, disappearing for hours with flimsy excuses. I'd become some kind of detective in my own life, following her, piecing together the hints she'd left behind without thinking twice. Then I saw them, together. They didn't even see me watching from the shadows. Her laugh echoed down the street, a sound I once thought was meant for me. Her hand was on his arm, fingers tracing his sleeve in that intimate way I used to know so well. Greg leaned in, his hand settling on her waist, whispering something that made her tilt her head back and laugh. I felt my stomach churn, the anger boiling inside me, simmering with each second. I don't remember driving home that night, barely remember making it through the front door without punching a hole in the wall. I thought about everything we'd been through, everything I'd sacrificed to make her happy, and this was how she repaid me? And Greg, of all people, the man I'd respected, looked up to, the man I'd trusted. I lay awake that night, planning, stewing, wondering if there was anything left to save, or if it was all just one big lie. Every single memory flashed through my mind, tainted with bitterness. It was like watching a horror film in slow motion, each scene replaying itself with a new, darker meaning. How long had this been going on? How many times had she laughed at my face behind closed doors? And then, a dark idea took shape. If she wanted to test my patience, I'd give her the surprise of her life. I'd never seen myself as the type of man to grab a gun, to face anyone in a rage. But that night, something snapped. I was no longer the man who stayed silent, who believed every lie she fed me. I was a man betrayed, a man with nothing left to lose. I knew exactly where they'd be. That's how I found myself here, standing at the foot of my own bed, watching my wife and my boss scramble under the sheets like rats caught in a trap. The room felt like it was closing in, walls thick with the stench of betrayal. I stood there, gun in hand, my chest heaving, eyes locked on the two people who had torn my world apart. Jenna, once my best friend, my partner, my everything, sat there clutching the sheets like they could protect her from the truth unraveling around us. And Greg? He looked at me with that same cocky smile I'd once mistaken for confidence. Now it was just arrogance, a twisted pride in what he'd stolen from me. What the hell, Chris? Jenna's voice cracked, her bravado slipping as her eyes darted from me to the gun. Put that thing down, are you crazy? I let out a bitter laugh. Crazy? Oh, I'm crazy now. I didn't recognize my own voice, thick with rage, edged with heartbreak. You think I don't know what's been going on? You think I haven't seen it all? Greg scoffed, rolling his eyes as he adjusted his posture like he had all the time in the world. Look, Chris, this isn't about you. This is just business. He smirked, glancing at Jenna like they were in on some private joke. Some joke where I was the punchline. Some of us just know how to handle things better. Some of us know how to please her. The words hit me like a slap. The room went cold, and something inside me shattered. I tightened my grip, willing myself to stay in control. I wasn't going to let them get the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. Jenna narrowed her eyes, her lip curling in disgust. Why do you even care, Chris? You barely even see me. All you do is work, sit in that miserable job, take orders from people like Greg. She spat the words like they were poison. And act like some kind of martyr. Well, maybe I got tired of it. Maybe I wanted a real man who knows what he's doing. I took a shaky breath, the weight of her words pressing down on me. A real man? I echoed, my voice barely a whisper. A real man doesn't destroy his own marriage for a quick thrill. She laughed, a harsh, unrecognizable sound. Oh, please, don't act like we had some fairy tale romance. You were always too busy, too tired, too weak. She sneered, her words sharp as knives. Maybe I wanted someone who actually paid attention to me. Greg chimed in, his voice slick with that fake, corporate charm I'd once respected. Face it, Chris, she's moved on. And frankly, she deserves someone who can actually take care of her. Not some pathetic, overworked shell of a man. The audacity. The two of them sat there, wrapped up in my sheets, in my bedroom, in my life, tearing me apart piece by piece. Every word they said was like gasoline poured on a fire already raging out of control inside me. Take care of her? I repeated, feeling the rage boil up, ready to explode. You think this is taking care of her? Lying, sneaking around, pretending like you're some kind of savior. I shook my head, the weight of every betrayal pressing down on me. You're nothing but a coward, Greg. And Jenna? You're nothing like the woman I thought I knew. But she just smirked, eyes glittering with cruelty. You never knew me, Chris. You were just a safe bet, a stepping stone. That's all. The words felt like a final blow, the last stab in a wound that would never heal. I felt my resolve waver, my vision blurring as I tried to keep my focus. I wanted to scream, to shout, to break something, anything to match the shattered mess inside me. But instead, I let out a shaky breath, forcing myself to step back. Greg, ever the opportunist, leaned back on the bed, that smug grin plastered across his face. Go on, Chris. Do something about it. Or are you just going to stand there and cry? Something in me snapped, a raw, primal anger I didn't know I had. Without a second thought, I lunged forward, grabbing him by the collar, dragging him up from the bed, sheets tangling around his legs as he stumbled. What are you doing? He stammered, his bravado crumbling, eyes wide with fear. I didn't say a word, just tightened my grip, lifting him to his feet, my fists clenched. Jenna screamed, scrambling off the bed, pulling a robe around herself, yelling something I couldn't hear, her words fading into the background as I focused on Greg. This man who had taken everything from me, who had broken my trust, who had mocked me in my own home. I threw a punch, feeling the crunch of his nose beneath my fist, a satisfaction I hadn't known I needed. He stumbled back, clutching his face, blood trickling down his chin as he glared at me, rage flaring in his eyes. Think you're so tough now? I spat, watching him struggle to keep his balance. Think you're a real man? But before he could respond, Jenna rushed forward, placing herself between us, her face twisted with fury. Stop it, Chris. You're pathetic. Look at yourself. This is why I left you, why I went to Greg. You're weak, pathetic, and desperate. Her words stung, each one a slap to my face, but I held my ground, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. Weak, I said, my voice low and steady. I stayed faithful. I kept my vows. I tried to build a life with you. But you threw it all away for him. She sneered, looking at me with a hatred I couldn't understand. Maybe you should have been worth staying faithful to. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words, the bitterness cutting deep. I knew then there was no going back. No patching this up, no saving what had been shattered. The weight of the moment settled over us, heavy and suffocating, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Jenna stood there, defiant and unflinching, her eyes blazing with a mix of contempt and satisfaction that I'd never seen before. Greg, cradling his bloody nose, tried to regain his composure, but he didn't dare move. Not yet. The silence stretched, tense and unyielding, until I finally broke it, my voice low and filled with a finality I hadn't felt until that moment. You both have 5 minutes to get out of my house, I said, the words cold and steady, each syllable driving a wedge deeper between us. Jenna laughed, but it was hollow, bitter. Your house? She scoffed, pulling herself up to her full height, as if her arrogance could protect her from the reality we were now facing. I think you're forgetting something, Chris. This is our house. You can't just throw me out. I clenched my jaw, fighting to keep my control. Jenna, I'm done. You made your choice and it wasn't me. So take your things. Take him. I spat, jerking my head toward Greg, and get out. I'm not going to spend another minute in this lie. Greg, always eager to assert control, wiped the blood from his face with a smirk. You think you can just order us around? That's rich. Newsflash, Chris, Jenna, and I, well, we've got plans. We were going to tell you soon enough, but it looks like you got the message. He chuckled, smug even now, as if he held all the cards. The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. Plans? They had been planning this, plotting to rip apart my life from the inside while keeping up this charade. Every happy memory, every shared dream, every hope I had for our future felt tainted, corrupted. I had to remind myself to breathe. Fine, I muttered, letting the rage drain, replaced by a hollow, icy clarity. If that's how it is, then there's nothing left to say. You can have her, Greg. She's all yours. Just remember, I said, leveling my gaze at Jenna. The way you treat people has a way of coming back around. Jenna rolled her eyes, that dismissive gesture she always used when she felt in control. Save the sermon, Chris. Maybe you should focus on getting a life for yourself instead of trying to control mine. Without another word, I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, leaving the wreckage of my marriage, my trust, and my life behind me. I didn't hear them packing or arguing. I didn't care. I just walked, each step pushing me further from the betrayal, from the man I'd been moments before. I drove aimlessly for hours, watching the dark roads unfold, hoping the night air could numb the chaos inside. But it didn't. Memories flooded my mind, one after the other. A bitter montage of love turned to ash. My mind replayed every moment, every lie, every excuse Jenna had ever given, taunting me, whispering that I should have seen it all coming. I pulled over to the side of the road, gripping the steering wheel as I stared out into the empty darkness. The pain hit me then, full force, raw and undeniable. I let myself feel it, the betrayal, the humiliation, the anger, until I was just a hollow shell. I didn't know what to do next. All I knew was that everything I'd thought was real, everything I'd built my life around, had crumbled in a single night. But in that emptiness, something unexpected emerged. A strange, quiet resolve. A whisper of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, I woke in my car, disoriented and stiff, the memories of the night before crashing down on me like a tidal wave. I could have stayed in that car, wallowing in the betrayal, letting it define me. But something inside me resisted. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was a survival instinct, but I knew I wasn't going to let them have that satisfaction. Not Greg, not Jenna. They'd taken enough. I spent the next few days in a haze of legal paperwork and painful clarity. I reached out to a lawyer, detailing everything. It turned out that Jenna hadn't been as clever as she thought. I still had the upper hand legally. This was my house, my assets. And thanks to a few well-kept records, I had enough evidence of the affair to make the divorce proceedings favor me. It was a small victory, but it was something. The process of unraveling our life together was painful, like tearing out a part of myself piece by piece. But with every document I signed, every memory I let go of, I felt a strange sense of freedom. About a week after that night, I got a text from Jenna. She hadn't reached out at all since leaving, but there it was. One last knife twisted in the wound. Hey Chris, you can keep the house. Greg and I don't need it. We're moving to New York. He got a promotion, by the way. Thought you'd like to know. I stared at the message, feeling the familiar anger rise, but this time it wasn't uncontrollable. I let it pass, like a wave I'd grown strong enough to withstand. Then, calmly, I deleted the message and blocked her number. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to feel. She and Greg could do whatever they wanted. They were out of my life for good. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The betrayal, the rage, the pain, they were still there, but they didn't own me. I wasn't the broken, humiliated man they'd expected me to be. I was stronger, sharper, forged by fire, ready to start a new chapter on my own terms. As I stood in the empty, quiet house that had once been filled with our laughter, our plans, I realized something. The life I'd been mourning, it was never real, not the way I'd thought. And while I couldn't change what had happened, I could decide what came next. With that thought, I stepped out of the house, locking the door behind me. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I was free. It had been a few weeks since Jenna and Greg had left, and the silence in the house was almost oppressive. I'd cleaned out the remnants of our life together. Her clothes, her perfume bottles, the stack of shared photos that once held meaning. They were all gone, boxed up and tossed out with as much care as she'd shown my heart. I'd even managed to land a new job, a place where no one knew the man I'd been before. My days were busier, my mind sharper, but every night, when the house fell silent, I still felt the ache, the burn of betrayal that hadn't quite faded. But then, one Friday night, as I was settling into the uncomfortable comfort of solitude, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some instinct, some strange tug, made me pick up. Hello. There was silence on the other end, then a shaky breath. I recognized it immediately, Jenna. Chris, it's me, she said, her voice barely a whisper, fragile in a way I'd never heard before. I could practically feel the weight of whatever she wanted to say pressing through the line. What do you want, Jenna? My voice was cold, firm. Every ounce of pity I'd once had for her dried up weeks ago. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice breaking. Please, just hear me out. There was a part of me that wanted to hang up, to deny her any more space in my life. But another part, the part that still had questions, that still wondered why she'd done this to us, kept me on the line. You've got 2 minutes, I replied, my voice steady. Make it count. She hesitated, then let out a breath that sounded like it had been held too long. Greg. He's not who I thought he was. The words were almost laughable. Really? Now you see that? I shot back, sarcasm dripping from my words. Should have thought of that before you climbed into bed with him, Jenna. No, you don't understand, she said, urgency cutting through her voice. After we left, everything changed. He wasn't the man I thought he was. He lied to me, Chris, about everything. A twisted sense of satisfaction bubbled up in me, but I held it back, keeping my tone even. That's rich, Jenna. You lied to me, too. Guess you two were perfect for each other after all. I know, she whispered, barely audible. I know I don't deserve your sympathy, but you have to believe me. I need your help. Her words hung in the air, and I found myself laughing, a dark, hollow sound that even surprised me. My help? You betrayed me, humiliated me, and now you want my help. Please, Chris, she begged, her voice strained and desperate. Greg, he's dangerous. He took everything from me. My savings, my credit, even my family won't talk to me because of what he's done. He left me here in some rundown motel with nothing. And for a split second, I felt the smallest flicker of pity, a ghost of the love I once felt for her. But it wasn't enough to overshadow the betrayal, the months of lies, the pain she'd caused. What did you expect me to do, Jenna? Run to the rescue? Why don't you just call the police? I did, she replied, her voice cracking. But there's nothing they can do. He was careful, covered his tracks. I was the fool who signed over my assets, trusting he'd keep his word. He told me you wouldn't help me. Said you'd rather see me suffer than lift a finger to help. A silence settled between us, heavy and tense. I could picture her sitting alone, broken and beaten down, realizing that she'd traded everything for a man who was just as false as her own loyalty had been. And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't calling me for love, for redemption. She was calling me because I was her last option. And yet, the old me, the man who'd once been her husband, who'd once loved her deeply, couldn't just let it go. I knew what it felt like to be crushed, to be betrayed by the people closest to you. Maybe, just maybe, helping her would bring me some closure. Or maybe it was simply the closure of watching her suffer in the mess she'd created. Fine, I said, sighing, surprising even myself. I'll meet you, but this isn't for you. It's for me. I need to see what's left of the woman I once knew. That night, I drove out to the motel on the edge of town, a place I never would have expected to find Jenna. It was run down, the kind of place that practically screamed desperation. I found her room number, knocked, and waited. The door creaked open, and there she was, pale, thinner than I remembered, her eyes hollow, stripped of that confidence she'd wielded like a weapon. She looked at me, and I could see the shame, the realization of her choices weighing heavy on her. Come in, she murmured, stepping aside. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and walked in, taking in the squalid state of the room. It was as if her surroundings mirrored the wreckage of her life. You wanted my help? I said, not bothering with pleasantries. So tell me what's going on. She nodded, looking down at her hands, fidgeting nervously. After we left, Greg started controlling things. He said he'd take care of everything, but he didn't. He took my money, all of it. My accounts are drained. My credit is maxed out. He even sold some of my things. I looked at her, disbelief mixed with a grim sense of satisfaction. And you expect me to help you after everything you put me through? She swallowed, looking away. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I don't have anyone else, Chris. I know I hurt you. I destroyed us. But please, I need a place to stay, just until I can get back on my feet. I felt the pull, the temptation to say yes, to help her out of some misplaced sense of duty. But another, darker part of me wanted her to feel the consequences of her actions, to understand just how far she'd fallen. This was her mess, and maybe she deserved to sit in it. But before I could respond, there was a loud knock on the door. Jenna's face went pale, her eyes widening in fear. Oh no, 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 she whispered, backing away, looking at me with a plea I couldn't fully understand. It's him. Greg, I asked, my voice hardening. She nodded, looking at the door as if it were her doom. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just a plea for help. This was a call for protection. Whatever Greg had done to her, she was genuinely terrified. I stepped toward the door, my fists clenched, and opened it. There he was, standing there with that same smug look, though this time it was darker, more twisted, his eyes glittering with menace. Chris, he said, smiling as if we were old friends. I see you got my message loud and clear. I could feel the tension in the air, the dangerous undercurrent that told me this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Greg, I replied, my voice steady. It's time we settle this. Once and for all. Greg's smile curled into something sinister as he stepped forward, crossing the threshold without an invitation, as if he owned the place. Jenna backed up, her eyes darting between the two of us, fear etched across her face. She knew as well as I did that this wasn't going to end with a simple conversation. "So, Chris," Greg began, his tone dripping with that trademark arrogance, "you really think you're some kind of hero? Coming here to save the woman who tossed you aside? Pathetic." I held my ground, crossing my arms and giving him a hard stare. "I didn't come here for you, Greg, and I sure didn't come here to play the hero. I came because I'm done with the both of you. But I wasn't going to let you hurt anyone else on your way out." His smirk faltered just a bit, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Oh, save it," he sneered. "You don't scare me, Chris. You never did. That's why Jenna was bored with you. You were too soft, too predictable. Nothing but a stepping stone." Jenna stood silently, watching our exchange with wide eyes. For the first time, I saw something raw in her gaze. Fear. Maybe regret, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I had no illusions about her or the mess she'd created. "What are you even doing here, Greg?" I asked, my voice steady, though my hands clenched at my sides. "You got what you wanted. Isn't that enough?" Greg let out a dark chuckle, leaning in close. "Enough? Oh no, Chris. You see, Jenna and I had a plan, but someone decided to get a little too curious. She tried to double-cross me, and I don't take kindly to that. And now—" He glanced over at Jenna, who shrank back, eyes wide. "Well, she's learned the hard way that I'm not as forgiving as you. You're a real piece of work. You know that?" I muttered, disgust bubbling in my chest. He stepped closer, that smug expression hardening into something darker. "You should be thanking me, Chris. I freed you from your boring little life. You get to start over. Hell, I even took the baggage off your hands." I clenched my jaw, my anger simmering. "You didn't free me from anything. You're nothing but a parasite, Greg. Leeching off people, taking what you can, then discarding them when they're no longer useful." Greg's face twisted in anger, his bravado slipping as he jabbed a finger in my chest. "Watch it, Chris. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Oh, I think I know exactly who I'm dealing with," I replied, my voice low, steady. "A small man who hides behind manipulation and deceit. A coward who thought he could walk all over me and everyone else in his path." Jenna, for once, found her voice, stepping forward. "Greg, please just leave. This is over. I've done everything you asked. Just go." But Greg turned on her, his face contorting with rage. "Over? You think you get to walk away from me, Jenna?" He took a step toward her, his tone dripping with venom. "You're mine. You don't just walk away from me. I make the rules. I decide when it's over." That was the breaking point. I stepped between them, planting myself firmly between Greg and Jenna, blocking his path. I could feel the tension, every nerve in my body on high alert. I'd had enough of watching people get hurt by this man. It was time to put an end to it. "Back off, Greg," I said, my voice calm but full of warning. He glared at me, sizing me up, and for a moment, I thought he might actually try to shove past. But then he sneered, taking a step back, his expression full of derision. "Fine, you can have her. Both of you can rot in this sad little life. I'm done with the both of you. Don't come crawling to me when you realize what you've lost." I didn't even blink, watching as he turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive, like the calm after a storm. I let out a long breath, feeling the tension drain from my body. Jenna stood there, looking small, broken. Her shoulders hunched as she stared at the door where Greg had just exited. She let out a shaky breath, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know he was like that. I thought." I shook my head, cutting her off. "You thought he was something he wasn't, Jenna. Just like I thought you were someone you weren't." Her gaze dropped, shame coloring her cheeks. "I know I hurt you, Chris. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't know how I got here." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, seeing her standing there, stripped of her arrogance, her confidence. She was a hollow shell, a stranger I no longer recognized. And maybe that was my closure. "Jenna, I can't fix what's broken here," I said softly, the finality of the words settling between us. "I don't know what you'll do next, but whatever it is, it doesn't involve me. I think it's best if you figure that out on your own." She nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek, but she didn't protest. She knew, as I did, that there was no going back, no salvaging what we'd destroyed. Without another word, I turned and walked out, leaving her in the quiet, empty motel room that mirrored the life she'd chosen. As I drove away, the weight on my chest began to lift, the burden of betrayal easing with every mile. For the first time, I felt a strange sense of peace, a sense of freedom. I'd faced my past, confronted the people who had torn me down, and walked away stronger. I didn't know where I was headed, didn't have a clear plan for what came next. But I knew that I was finally done living in the shadows of other people's choices. This was my life, and for the first time, it felt like it truly belonged to me. As the sun began to rise on the horizon, I smiled, the first real smile I'd felt in months. The future was wide open, a blank canvas waiting for me to paint on my own terms. The relief of leaving Jenna and Greg behind was palpable, like shedding a second skin I hadn't realized had grown over me. I'd come out of the darkest chapter of my life stronger, wiser, and surprisingly free. For a while, I even enjoyed the peace, the quiet that came with moving on. I poured myself into work, found new hobbies, spent time with old friends I'd lost touch with. I was rediscovering myself, piece by piece, and it felt like a fresh start. But just as I was settling into this new life, the unexpected happened. It was a Saturday evening, and I was heading back from the grocery store when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen, my brows furrowing when I saw an unknown number. A familiar pang of caution crept up, but I answered anyway. "Hello." There was a pause on the other end, then a voice I hadn't expected to hear ever again. "Chris, it's Jenna." My stomach dropped, anger flaring up before I could catch it. "What do you want, Jenna?" "I need to see you," she said, her tone urgent, laced with fear. "Please, it's important." I wouldn't ask if it wasn't. I almost hung up, almost told her to never call me again. But something about her voice, cracked, desperate, pleading, made me hesitate. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her, setting up a time and place at a coffee shop in a part of town where no one would recognize us. When I walked into the cafe the next day, Jenna was already there, seated at a small corner table, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug. She looked different, gaunt, nervous, her eyes darting around the room as if she were being followed. When she saw me, she offered a weak smile, her lips barely lifting at the corners. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice trembling. I sat down across from her, keeping my distance, arms crossed. "Make this quick, Jenna. What's going on?" She took a shaky breath, eyes flicking around the room before settling back on me. "It's Greg. He's after me. I think he's dangerous, Chris. Really dangerous." I scoffed, leaning back in my chair. "Oh, now you realize he's dangerous? After he's destroyed your life and left you with nothing?" She shook her head, genuine fear glinting in her eyes. "It's worse than that. I found something he's been hiding. I think he's involved in some illegal stuff, embezzling from the company, shady deals with people I don't even want to think about." "Then call the cops," I replied flatly. "This isn't my problem, Jenna." "I tried," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But he has connections, people who can make things disappear. The police wouldn't listen, Chris. They brushed me off." I took a deep breath, weighing her words, trying to gauge if she was being honest or just pulling me back into her mess. "And what do you expect me to do about it?" Jenna leaned forward, desperation etched into every line of her face. "I need proof, Chris. I need someone who knows the system, someone who can help me expose him." I let out a harsh laugh. "You really expect me to risk my life, my sanity, for you? After everything you did to me?" Her shoulders slumped, her gaze dropping to the table. I know I don't deserve your help. I know I ruined everything. But Greg, he's not gonna stop. And if I go down, he'll make sure you're caught in the crossfire too. He knows things about us. About you. That could ruin your life just as much as mine." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Greg hadn't just played her. He'd set both of us up, weaving a web of deceit that extended far beyond our broken marriage. If Jenna was telling the truth, then Greg was far more dangerous than I'd realized. A man who didn't just play games for fun, but who destroyed lives with precision. "What do you need?" I asked, the words coming out before I could stop myself. Jenna looked up, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Just one meeting somewhere I know he'll be. I've heard he keeps his documents in a safe at his office. If we can get in, find something incriminating, it might be enough to get him out of both our lives for good." Against every shred of logic, I agreed. Maybe it was unfinished business, a desire to see Greg face consequences for the wreckage he'd caused. Or maybe, just maybe, I wanted closure, not just for myself, but for the part of me that once thought Jenna and I would last forever. The night of the plan, I met Jenna outside Greg's office building. It was late, the streets quiet, and Jenna's face was pale with tension. She'd managed to find a way in, using her old access card, and together, we slipped through the back entrance, moving silently through the darkened hallways. Greg's office was at the end of the hall, its glass walls reflecting the faint glow of the city outside. Jenna entered the passcode she'd remembered, and the door unlocked with a quiet click. My pulse was racing, each step taking me deeper into a realm I'd never expected to be a part of. In the center of the room was Greg's massive desk, and behind it, the safe Jenna had mentioned. I scanned the room, noting every detail, my instincts on high alert. Jenna knelt by the safe, her fingers trembling as she input a combination, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The safe door swung open, and inside was a stack of folders, hard drives, and a black leather-bound notebook. Jenna grabbed everything, her eyes wide with urgency. But as she turned to hand them to me, the unmistakable click of a gun echoed in the silence. We froze and slowly turned around. There, standing in the doorway, was Greg, his face twisted into a cruel grin, the barrel of a gun aimed directly at us. Well, he drawled, stepping into the room, the gun never wavering. "Look who decided to play detective." I felt my stomach drop, every escape plan dissolving as Greg stepped closer, his eyes cold, calculating. "You two idiots really thought you'd pull one over on me?" he sneered. "I told you, Jenna, you're mine. And Chris," he added, his grin widening, "you just made the biggest mistake of your life." The room felt like it was shrinking, the walls pressing in as Greg aimed the gun directly at me. Jenna clutched the files, her face a mask of terror, and in that moment, I knew that whatever happened next, this was the end of the line. Either we walked out of here with the truth or we didn't walk out at all. In a flash of adrenaline, I lunged forward, grabbing the desk chair and swinging it toward Greg. The chair struck his arm, and the gun clattered to the floor. Jenna screamed, and Greg stumbled back, momentarily stunned. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing her arm as we bolted toward the door, leaving Greg's shouts and threats echoing behind us. We tore down the hall, the documents clutched tightly in her hands, and burst out into the night, our hearts pounding as we sprinted into the shadows, escaping into the darkness. For the first time, Jenna's hand was in mine, not out of love, but out of survival, bound together by a shared enemy and a single desperate goal. Escape Greg's grip, expose him, and finally be free. We ran through the quiet city streets, ducking into alleys and cutting across empty lots until we reached the car I'd parked a few blocks away. We threw ourselves inside, panting, the adrenaline still surging through our veins. Jenna was clutching the files like her life depended on it, and in a way it did. As I started the car and pulled away, I glanced at her, both of us still processing what had just happened. Greg had seen us, he knew we had his documents, and if Jenna was right, he wouldn't stop until he took us both down. "Do you even know what's in those files?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the road as I took sharp turns, distancing us from Greg's office as fast as I could. She looked down at the stack, her hands trembling. No, but I've seen him guarding them like his life depended on it. Whatever he's involved in, these are the keys. If we can get them to the right people, maybe we can bring him down. I clenched the wheel, the reality of what we were about to do sinking in. Greg wasn't just some lying, cheating boss. He was far more dangerous than I'd ever realized. But we had the evidence now, the leverage he'd never expect. And for once, I had the power. As we reached a quiet, isolated parking lot, I pulled over and took a deep breath. "All right," I said, glancing at Jenna. "Let's see what's in these." She handed me the stack, her eyes filled with a mix of dread and hope. I opened the first folder, flipping through a mess of numbers and names, bank statements, offshore accounts, wire transfers to companies I'd never heard of. The dates went back years, revealing a trail of financial deception and fraud. Greg had been embezzling millions, hiding it through shell corporations and fake investments. But there was more, references to people, coded messages about transactions that were more than financial. My stomach churned as I realized we were looking at records of bribes, payoffs, and something even darker. "Greg's been paying people off," I muttered, feeling a chill settle over me. "Politicians, judges. He's got connections in every corner of the city. No wonder you couldn't go to the cops, Jenna. He owns half of them." Jenna nodded, her face pale. "He was always so careful. I never understood why he was so paranoid. Now I see. He knew that if anyone found out about this, it would ruin him. And us, by association." Suddenly, it hit me, we weren't safe. Greg would know by now that we had his secrets, and he wouldn't stop until he got them back. We had to act, and fast. "There's only one way we're getting out of this," I said, feeling a surge of determination. "We need to take this to someone he doesn't control. Someone who can make this public. Expose him without letting him cover it up." Jenna nodded, her eyes widening with realization. "The press," she whispered. "They're the only ones who can take this and make it too big for him to contain." The next morning, we arranged to meet with a local investigative journalist, Alex Grant. He had a reputation for taking down powerful people, digging into the dirtiest corners of society and exposing the truth no matter the cost. Jenna and I waited in a crowded diner, nerves jangling as we waited for him to arrive. When Alex finally walked in, he looked like he'd just come off a stakeout. Disheveled, alert, his eyes sharp as he took in the room. He approached our table, his gaze shifting between Jenna and me, already assessing us. "So, you're the ones with the scoop on Greg Marshall?" he asked, his tone cautious but intrigued. "We have everything you need," I replied, sliding the files across the table. "Bank statements, wire transfers, coded messages, and proof of payoffs. It's all there." He opened the first folder, flipping through it with a practiced eye. After a few minutes, he looked up, a glint of excitement sparking in his eyes. "This is huge," he murmured. "This could take down half the city's political elite." "That's what we're counting on," Jenna said, her voice steady, but I could hear the fear beneath it. "But there's one problem. Greg knows we have it, and he's not going to let us walk away from this easily." Alex nodded, as if he understood the weight of the situation all too well. "Don't worry. I've dealt with people like him before. Once this goes public, he'll be fighting for his own survival. I'll get this story out, but you two might need to lay low for a while." The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Jenna and I stayed in a small, nondescript motel on the outskirts of town, waiting for the story to break. We barely spoke, the tension between us lingering, too raw to address. I didn't know if I could ever truly forgive her, but in that moment we were allies united by a common goal. Then, on the third morning, the headline hit every major news outlet. City power broker exposed. Millions in embezzlement, corruption, and criminal ties. Alex hadn't held back, publishing every detail we'd given him, and more. Photos of Greg, his partners, and every shady deal he'd hidden were splashed across the front pages. News anchors dissected the story, pundits debated his downfall, and the police, under public pressure, announced a full investigation. Greg was finished. The relief was overwhelming, but it was bittersweet. As I watched the fallout, I realized that although we'd won, I'd still lost. My life, my marriage, the trust I'd once had, they were gone, broken beyond repair. Later that day, Jenna and I sat on a park bench, watching the city bustle around us, the weight of everything we'd been through pressing down on us. She turned to me, her eyes filled with regret. "Chris, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I'm so sorry. For everything." I looked at her, feeling the remnants of love, anger, and sorrow mix in a way I couldn't untangle. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Jenna, but maybe it doesn't matter anymore. We've both paid for our mistakes." She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek, and for the first time, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. We sat in silence, two people bound by a past we couldn't change and a future that held no promises. After a while, she stood up, looking at me with a sad smile. "I think it's time for me to go, Chris. Time to start over." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of closure. "Goodbye, Jenna." She walked away, fading into the crowd, and for the first time, I felt truly free. As I sat there, watching her disappear into the city, I realized that this was the ending I needed. Not one of revenge or reconciliation, but of release, a quiet, unexpected freedom to finally move on. And as the city hummed around me, I knew that I'd be all right. As I sat alone on that park bench, watching Jenna disappear into the crowded streets, a sense of closure washed over me. A quiet freedom that felt hard-won and bittersweet. I'd let go of the past, finally unchained from the betrayal that had once consumed me. The city hummed around me, bustling with life, indifferent to the chaos I just survived. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But just as I began to rise, ready to leave this chapter behind, my phone buzzed with a notification. I pulled it from my pocket, assuming it was a news update about Greg's ongoing investigation. But the name on the screen made my blood run cold. Unknown number. I hesitated, the memory of Jenna's last call flickering through my mind. My instincts screamed to ignore it, to leave the past in the past. But something pulled at me, a dark curiosity that I couldn't resist. Against all logic, I answered, "Hello." There was silence on the other end, thick and loaded, and then a voice I knew all too well spoke, smooth and venomous. Well, Chris. I always knew you were a stubborn one." I froze. It was Greg. "Surprised to hear from me?" he continued, his tone icy, yet dripping with that unsettling charm I once thought was confidence. "You didn't think I'd let you walk away that easily, did you?" I swallowed, forcing myself to stay calm. "You're finished, Greg. Everything's out. You don't have any power left." He chuckled, a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Is that what you think? That a few newspaper headlines and some public outrage can stop me? I've been playing this game a lot longer than you know. I always have a plan." The confidence in his voice was chilling, a dark reminder that Greg was not the type of man who gave up. And then, as if reading my mind, he delivered his next words with a slow, deliberate menace. "I have friends in high places, Chris. Friends who owe me favors. You may have won this round, but I've barely begun." My mind raced, piecing together the implications of his words. Was he bluffing? Or had he left enough pieces in place to pull himself out of this mess and exact his revenge? My pulse pounded as I realized that, even in defeat, Greg was dangerous. Perhaps more so than ever. "What do you want, Greg?" I asked, my voice hardening, refusing to let him see the fear clawing at me. There was a pause, then a soft, dark laugh. "I want you to know that you'll never be free of me, Chris. Not really. No matter where you go, what you do. I'll always be there, in the shadows, waiting. And when you least expect it, I'll be back to finish what I started." The line went dead, leaving only silence, a hollow echo that seemed to seep into my bones. I sat there, gripping the phone, staring blankly at the city skyline, a sinking feeling settling in my gut. Greg was gone, but his words lingered, wrapping around me like a vice, cold and suffocating. I'd won the battle, but a new, darker war loomed on the horizon. Greg was out there, plotting, waiting, And as much as I wanted to believe he was finished, a part of me knew he was right. He would always be there, lurking just beyond my reach, a shadow in my life I couldn't escape. For the first time, I realized that freedom wasn't as simple as I'd thought. The scars of betrayal, the consequences of that fateful night, they would follow me no matter how far I ran. And with each passing moment, a new understanding settled over me. Greg's final message wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And as I walked away from that park bench, a quiet, unsettling dread gnawed at the edges of my newfound peace. I'd stepped out of the storm, but the clouds were still gathering, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, ominous, inevitable. It had only just begun.